Welcome back, family, to part 5 of What is the Truth? This is Joseph Atwill being interviewed in reference to the title of The Roman Creation of Christ. So let's get back to it.
It was understood from very early on that hey, everything that Jesus is predicting, Titus is bringing about, and Jesus says that this is all going to come to pass. All of these events, this apocalyptic sequence of events that he envisions, is all going to come about during the time when the Son of Man makes a visitation, and he's using the expression "the Son of Man" in the context that Daniel used it as the Messiah. So you have, from the very early beginnings of Christian scholarship, you have an understanding that Jesus was predicting the events of Titus's campaign, and you also have, from the historians of the era, the clear-cut declaration that Titus saw himself as the Messiah. So it's that Titus was simply the only individual in history that could have been the Son of Man that Jesus was envisioning. And probably couldn't have been Jesus because he didn't show up to actually to work any of these events. But Titus did. Titus fulfilled all of the events that the Son of Man was supposed to have brought about during his visitation. And Titus flatly claimed to be the Jewish Messiah. So when you start out with that understanding, which unfortunately is not an understanding that is widely known, by Christian scholars at this point. But when you start out with these things that are completely clear-cut and which are demonstrable to anyone, then you look at the conceptual relationship between Jesus' ministry and the campaign, and it is completely crystal clear that the literature of the Gospels was created to envision the Titus's campaign and to proclaim him as the Jewish Messiah.
Okay, let's go further into the anti-Semitism in the New Testament. Was this Titus can be successful in his campaign, or what was this about?
The anti-Semitism, in my mind, was created out of very personal reasons, and it didn't have to be. In other words, it would have been possible to have developed a pacifistic version of Judaism that wasn't so specifically anti-Semitic as the Gospels are. In the Gospels, you have the famous passage where a mob is demanding that Pontius Pilate give them Jesus, and when he says, "Okay, I will do this, but I consider him just," and the mob of Jews cries out, "Well, his blood will be on our hands and on our children's hands." All right. Well, if it's fiction, why would you need to put that in there? And the reason, in my mind, is just out of the personal hatred that the Flavians felt for the Messianic movement. Historians record that both Vespasian, Titus's father, and Titus were wounded during the war. Titus evidently never regained full use of his left arm. He took a stone to it during some battle. And so it was in that context of a Caesar, one of the most egomaniacal individuals, at least as far as we can tell, who've ever lived, having been wounded, having physically wounded, and it was in that context that the Gospels were written. So that was that the hatred of the Jews that the Gospels reflect is a simple reflection of the fact that people were responsible for the work being created or so anti-Semitic. And
where's the proof that it's deliberate anti-Semitism?
Right. Well, the simplest proof, and it's one that anyone who is listening to this show can simply do themselves, is that Josephus, in his history of the war, which links to the Gospels, created a passage which flatly declares simply go online. You don't have to buy the book. To an online copy of Worth of the Jews by Flavius Josephus. Go to the sixth book, line 201 through 219. It's going to be either in the Wisdom translation or in Perseus, which is a collection of online antiquity. Go to book 6, line 201 through 219, and you will see that the first half of the passage is a description of a human Passover lamb. The Passover lamb is a summary. The location is Jerusalem. And you can see that the authors have created the Passover lamb using the same techniques that found in the Gospels. In other words, the child is flatly stated to be a sacrifice. He is from the house of hyssop, and he is roasted. Now, it takes a little bit of understanding of the Gospels to recognize the symbolism, but in the Gospels, they combine hyssop with one of the instructions for the preparation of the Passover lamb, which is that you don't break the bones of it. In the Gospel of John, the soldier marks Jesus with a rod of hyssop, and then you have the statement that don't break his bones. So you know that the author has established him as a symbolic human Passover lamb, and this links back to Jesus' statement saying, if you don't eat of my flesh, there'll be no life in you. This very unusual cannibalism language, which is in the Gospels, and of course is not a reflection of anything in Judaism, but is in the Gospels for some particular reason. Well, if you then look at the passage in Josephus that I mentioned, you'll see that this son of Mary, who is a sacrifice, is from the house of hyssop, which is even a clearer metaphorical relationship to the actual Old Testament use of hyssop with the Passover lamb, and is stated that he is roasted, which was the other instruction regarding the preparation of the Passover lamb. So if you have any doubts, you can simply dial up a rabbi and ask him, what is the roasted sacrifice of the house of hyssop?
Sure.
And you'll see, or any Jew someone who's familiar with their canon, they'll know, that is the Passover lamb. So this child in Josephus is a perfectly transparent parallel to Jesus. He is a human Passover lamb, and whereas Jesus states that you must eat the flesh in order of in a cannibalistic sense, this child is actually eaten by his mother. So you have here two really obvious passages that are related, because these are the only human Passover lambs that I've ever encountered in literature. There's only so many concepts that you can use to set up a human Passover lamb, and so the idea that they would occur circumstantially is far-fetched, and they're both flatly stated to be the son of Mary, and the location is Jerusalem. Okay, so now you then move on in the passage in Josephus, and you'll see that the second half of the passage describes what the effect of this character is going to be upon the Jews. And you have one of the most brilliant pieces of wordplay in literature, and I wrote about this in one of my online discussions, and I said that you have to give the devil his due, because it's very witty. In Josephus, the child is described as a myth for the world. This child is a myth for the world, and they use the Greek word mythos, whose eating and killing will be seen as an atrocity. And they use the Greek word misos, and then this atrocity will then create bitter hatred, mesos, of the Jews. So in other words, what this triple homophonic wordplay with this subtly, shifting, just a single letter being, taken out of each of the words as you move through the process. What it indicates is that the Son of Mary, who is a Passover lamb, is a myth, and a myth for the world, who's going to be seen as an atrocity, whose death and eating will be seen as an atrocity, and that this will create hatred of the Jews. Now, combine that description of what actually occurred in history, right? To combine that statement with the only other than the Gospel's creation of a human Passover lamb. I mean, you can argue that it's circumstantial, but this would just be so far-fetched that, in my mind, it's really not even something you want to consider in a rational context. I've written that it is not just a bad analytic technique of contemporary gospel and Bible scholars. This passage isn't, understood in this way. It is just a complete breakdown in human intelligence. I mean, this is to not investigate within the framework that I suggest. It's just crazy. And any reader thinks that this present is far-fetched, just simply take the 5 minutes it would take to dial Josephus up online, the wars of the Jews, go to this passage, read it, and look at both the description of the human Passover Lamb, the Son of Mary, and of the very sophisticated wordplay, which indicates that this is going to be, this myth for the world is going to create the hatred of the Jews, and not, agree that this is, my interpretation is the correct way to understand this passage. The other thing that is important to recognize.
And it's getting worse. I thought it was going to clear up. So I checked my signal and it's fine. So I would say it's the video. So we're going to close out from this. It's already 12 minutes in. And what I'll do is come back on. Thanks, family.